Man, I love when a Blumhouse movie comes out because I've started to fall in love with these movies. Blumhouse, whether they've got good or bad movies, there's some bad ones too. But recently, Blumhouse has made two horror movies that I've absolutely loved and think are some of the best horror movies I've seen in years, which were Get Out and Ouija: Origin of Evil. And now I'm getting more and more excited every time I get an announcement or a trailer for a new movie from Blumhouse because whether they're good or bad, like I said, they are interesting in how they are trying to be different than other horror movies of in this time. And Happy Death Day is no exception because Happy Death Day is a modern slasher movie, but it feels like an 80s slasher movie, even though it's literally not very violent. It's a PG-13, and that's the only thing in the movie that bothered me because it wasn't a violent slasher, but the movie itself, I thought, besides that, was really, really good. I don't think I love it as much as Ouija, Origin of Evil, or um, Get Out, but I think that Happy Death Day really, really sold me. The trailer sold me, though, first. Before I even saw this, the trailer was just one of my favorite trailers this last year. Like, I love whenever there's a trailer that's so interesting and different than what we usually get. And I love how this trailer felt like an 80s horror movie trailer, but it's modern and it has 50 Cent singing one of the 50 Cent songs, and it's the ringtone of her phone in the trailer, even though it's not in the movie, but it's just in the trailer with that song that 50 Cent has. But I love the trailer, and I love the style of it, and I loved how, even though I knew it was Groundhog Day, just as a horror movie, the trailer sold me. Its style, it's seemed clever, even though it was borrowing from something else, and it really worked on that level for the trailer for me. And the movie itself, I think, was really good. I don't think it's like I said, I don't love it as much as Ouija: Origin of Evil or Get Out, but I think that it is a very noble effort. Besides it being a PG-13 horror movie, and even though it's a PG-13 horror movie, it cheapens out on the violence, but you really don't. To me, it doesn't feel like it's completely needed because in place of that, we get really great characters. And this is what I love about Blumhouse. Blumhouse really, instead of, even though the horror movies from the 80s are fun, and I love 80s horror movies, I love how this company really focuses on characters. Even though it's a horror movie, and horror movies are not known for their character development or character arcs, but I thought that in these last couple movies and Happy Death Day, they did fantastic with these characters. The main girl who played Tree, I don't know her name, but she was fantastic, and she had an actual character arc to her. Because at the beginning of the movie, she's a dickhead to everybody. Like, she's the worst person ever. Like, she treats everybody like dog shit. But I love that too because it makes her change as a person throughout all the time she dies. And it really shows that whenever she's trying to figure out who the killer is, everybody hates her. And I think that that's such a great dynamic with having her her being a dick to everybody and everybody hates her, so you never know who it is until the end, who the killer is. And I thought that that was really cool that it made it seem unpredictable in a way, even though it is technically predictable. I feel like I understood where this would go, and it did pretty much go the same way I thought, except for like something at the end, which I won't spoil here. But I thought that for the most part, the movie didn't surprise me, and it didn't scare me much, but it was really funny. And I think it's not trying to be super scary because it is PG-13. And I know that saying that makes it sound like an insult to the movie, but I don't really think so. I think that the movie is trying to be just a fun little time because it is hilarious as well. And the humor doesn't ruin it either. It's a fun mix of humor and horror. But more on the humor part and more on the character part. And that's what I love in this movie, in that since it's not a violent, overly suspenseful horror movie, it makes up with that for the characters. And even though, like I said, they're not amazingly well realized characters, but all of the characters are so likable, and they're so, like, especially the main girl after you watch it for a little bit, because she develops a nicer personality as it goes along. But I loved all these characters. I thought that they all were intriguing. Even the smaller characters, they all had something to them. They all had things that you learn about all of them. And I loved how it didn't skimp away from all these characters just being characters that were thrown away to the background. They had stuff to do and they had actual development, even though it really, like, to me, it works so well with this. And I like how, even though, like, this is a slasher movie, I like that it's just the main girl who dies and she just keeps dying and coming back. Like Groundhog Day, she just keeps waking up same day again. I really loved how it happened so many times in this movie that she died. I think that she mentions in the movie how many times she dies, and it wasn't a whole lot. But I love how she the way that she goes on with this every time, like, and it's not repetitive every time she dies. Just, and it reminds me of Groundhog Day and Edge of Tomorrow, where even though this happens a billion times, the main character wakes up and does the same day over again. I thought that it really was still interesting throughout, because every time they did a new day, they did something different. They made her change differently. They made all the characters around her react differently. They made montages of her dying, and it was really cool and really fun whenever they had the montage of her learning and her trying to figure out who the killer was, and she figured out things about all these characters, and she didn't just go throughout the movie and not learn a lesson. And I love that, because she was a dickbag in the beginning of the movie. Like, she was horrible, horribly unlikable. But as she went along, really, she really got me. Like, this actress is really good. I don't know what her name is, and I feel bad that I can't say her name. I don't know what it is, but I really loved her in this. I thought that she was so good. And she was hilarious, and she was intriguing and heartwarming. And there's one scene in the movie, I'm going to keep it spoiler free, but there's one scene where she kind of breaks down and has this monologue. And for a horror movie, I did not expect this scene. And the lesson she learns really, really works so well. And that's what I love about this movie. It's a horror movie, but it's a comedy, and it's also got great emotion to it, too. It actually has characters worth caring about. None of them are characters that are just thrown to the side. And this isn't the typical slasher, though, where everybody dies off. It's just the main girl, and she wakes up again from it. She doesn't technically die. But I loved how all these characters got breathing room, and they all were really endearing and all interesting, and they all gripped me, too. I thought that was great. It wasn't even though I love 80s slasher movies, it wasn't where they're just there and then they get killed off, or they're just in the background. These characters had a purpose, and I love that so much about this movie, that it really, really gave some points in its favor for me, just how much they cared about these characters, how much these writers cared to make them interesting and make them likable, and make, by the end, make it all work so well. Just with the characters, it really got me so much. The characters and the horror, it isn't scary, but I think that it's entertaining. That's really what I would give a definition of this movie. It's very entertaining. It's entertaining, but it's definitely a step above a lot of horror movies. Like, it's not my favorite, but it is definitely a really good one. I really did like it, and I did appreciate its love for characters and its love for how these characters reacted, and the jokes were funny, and the horror was fine. It just wasn't really scary, but I didn't expect that out of a PG-13 movie. But I love how we get a good PG-13 horror movie. It's just like Ouija Origin of Evil. That was a great one, too. And that didn't rely on the violence as well. And in this movie, the violence, yeah, you could put it in there, but to me, I thought it would matter more if the characters weren't as interesting, or if the main character wasn't interesting, but she was so intriguing the whole way through. So I really thought that they did a fantastic job with this movie. It's not my favorite movie of the year, but it's one that definitely, I think, is a really good horror movie. Or, I guess a really good movie, I would say. Not the best, but it's really good. It's hard to say it's a good horror movie, because it's not really scary, and it's not always trying to be. It's more character driven and more funny. But overall, I really thought that it was a really noble effort from Blumhouse, and it really works well. It's not one that I love like Get Out or Ouija Origin of Evil, but it's a really noble effort and it really worked in a lot of senses. And the things that I didn't like about it really don't overtake the good things. It's just it just makes the movie good as opposed to really great. But overall, I thought it was good. It was a good movie that I really appreciated, and as a fan of '80s horror, I thought that this was a great throwback. Even though it's a modern horror movie, it feels like it came right out of the '80s, except for the fact they have cell phones and it's 2017. But I thought that this really works really well as a movie. It really was good. So overall, I really, really liked Happy Death Day. Thanks guys so much for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.